I appreciate the discussion because there's so much in this election. As I was going through, I did not have my eyes on the data. I was not breaking down polls. I did not pay attention to the exit polls. I went through personally a very transitionary type of phase of just watching, not getting too excited, not getting too happy, because we essentially have been already given the script, in my opinion, of how this is going to go down. We knew the pandemic had interrupted voting. We knew that there were a large contingent of Democratic votes that were being asked to go ahead and mail in their ballots. We knew that because of the mail-in ballots, there was going to be a delay. We had already been told that there was, we've been talking about fraud for I don't know how many months. So we kind of had a very good idea as to what the scenario of ideas are going to play out. And so I was talking to my mother, and I kind of likened it to me just watching a car crash. Just watching, and just sitting there. Traffic's not going anywhere. We're all stuck on 95. Let's just keep our eyes on this to see if, what happens.
Welcome to Generational Talk. So we just had the election 2020. So 2020 election night, which turns into the 2020 election week. So, I mean, I think that's just like a perfect example of how this year is going. The roller coaster ride of the week. And we're here to react to it. But before we get to that point, I just want to have everyone introduce themselves.
My name is Alice Bell. I'm a accounting and finance student at the University of Texas in Arlington. And yeah, I was on the pre-election video as well, and was very wrong about some things, which I guess we'll talk about. So. And
you're in your generation Z or millennial?
Yes, yeah, I consider myself Gen Z. I was born in 1998, so I guess that I'm a cusper, but I identify more with Gen Z for sure.
David Payne. I am been a member of a couple panels that we've had on a number of different topics here. I think this is the first one that I participated in specifically about the election. So I'm excited to kind of see what's everyone's reaction. I'm a father of 4-year-old triplets in South Florida, so I'm very familiar with Florida man and what happens in this state. So I look forward to kind of going over that a little bit.
Are you volunteering yourself to defend Florida's actions?
Oh, hell no. No. And not pursuant to this election, but in general, I am not going to be a defender of Florida for anything. Okay. So I will purely speak to my experience here.
David Kaiser, boomer historian. I missed the pre-election panel, but I've been on other panels as well.
Hi, I am Kat Street. I am a filmmaker based in Los Angeles, but a Philadelphia native, proudly, I will say, today.
Are you prepared?
Forever.
Are you prepared to tell everyone how awesome Philadelphia is in every way?
Absolutely.
And how
if there's anything that Philadelphians are good at, is talking
about Philly.
Is talking the best things about Philly.
And how, once again, we gain independence in that city.
Yes.
I'm Amy. I am a Gen Xer. I live in Texas. And like Alice, I was wrong. And like David, I am not going to defend Texas. Spent a lot of time doing that, but I'm not doing that now. Okay.
Tommy, I'm in Connecticut. I'm a core millennial, 1988, and yeah, I'm pretty happy that Connecticut voted the way we all expected. Yeah.
I'm Phil Honeycutt. I'm from Northern Virginia. I'm on the millennial cusp, on the opposite cusp from Alice, and.
I just want to say the views expressed on this show against Virginia and the South do not reflect generational talk.
In fact, Phil Honeycutt.
Disclaimer. Just put a disclaimer there.
It just occurred to me that we're very fortunate that sometime before the Civil War, I should be able to give you the date, but I can't. The District of Columbia was originally a square, and HAPA was in Virginia. And they gave
Yes.
that back to Virginia because they decided they wouldn't need it. But if they hadn't done that, there's a good chance that Virginia would still be a red state today. So
Yeah,
it's probably
Arlington
just as
goes
well
very
that
blue.
they did, exactly.
It's hit to be square. Okay, election night. Let's go back to Tuesday, and it's 11 p.m. and you're tired. You were watching election coverage all night. What was your thought at 11 p.m.?
I think my thought, well, I mean, I don't know exactly what time it was, but I know that I started freaking out. I'm not gonna lie that I started freaking out when I saw the results coming in from Miami-Dade. Because what I was telling people beforehand was that if Florida goes for Biden, this would be an early night because we wouldn't have to worry about the states that are going to take forever to come in. And I was like, if Florida doesn't go Biden's way, then we may not know for days or weeks or months. And so when I saw the results coming in from Miami-Dade, I got very nervous. And then we started seeing, I went to bed that night. I was already nervous before the election, thinking that he could win again. And I went to bed that night thinking that there was a very, very good chance that he would win again. Yeah.
I realized I don't think I shared my prediction during the prediction episode.
Mhm.
And so but I did during our pre-show. We had a pre-show, didn't we, that Sunday? And so
Yeah.
I remember I did say that we were probably going to go to bed in suspense. And, for those who didn't want Trump to win, we're probably going to be, a little frantic and scared, but would find out that Biden would catch up by the end of the week. Anyway, anyone else want to share their thoughts?
I was nervous, like Tommy, because the Miami-Dade, as everyone else nodded, yeah, that freaked me out. But as the night was going on and it was so close, the thing that made me nervous was, and what makes me nervous is, oh my gosh, we are so much more divided than I thought we were. So that scared me. I knew, I kind of felt by the time I went to bed that somehow, some way, Biden was still going to pull it out in the end, but I didn't think it was going to be this close, because by the time I went to bed, Wisconsin and Michigan had been called, but man, that was a squeaker.
Wait, Wisconsin and Michigan weren't called till the next day.
I thought they were called that
No.
night.
No,
they weren't. And
Okay,
they
well,
weren't.
now I'm getting, see, maybe I'm wrong then, because
It's because we
it's
lost
all
sleep
going,
that
it's all
whole week.
becoming a blur now
Yeah.
as to when I was feeling what. But
I feel like
Okay,
Trump
never
was
mind.
calling it for himself, but no one else was confirming it, right?
Yeah.
yeah, and for days and days, I kept hearing about how Pennsylvania was going to go Biden's way, and they kept promising that, and I'm like, I'm not seeing that. I still see Trump ahead. I'm not seeing this.
By hundreds of thousands
I mean,
of votes.
Yeah, by
I was
hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
I'm like,
But Virginia looked like
what are you
that, too.
talking about?
I was watching the trends in Pennsylvania and Georgia for days, basically from the day after Election Day, and going, mathematically, Biden is going to pull ahead here, and he did in both. So I wasn't too concerned by some point the day after Election Day, but I'll get into all of that whenever it's actually my turn to speak here.
All right, David Kaiser.
Okay, well, allow me to give you a little background. The first election I remember was 1952, when I was 5. And probably the reason I remember that is my father was already in the sub-cabinet under Truman. And I didn't exactly realize that he was going to lose his job if Eisenhower defeated Stevenson, but I got the message that the outcome of this was very important to my family. And I remember my older brother and I were in bunk beds at that point. He was in the top. And the next morning I said, who won? And he said, Eisenhower. And I knew that was bad news. So what I'm trying to get across is, to start with, I've taken these elections very seriously all my life. And I still say that election night in 1960 was the most exciting night of my life. That one turned out better. But I've been terrified over this one for months. And I realized that, I think in September, maybe early September, I'd had some dental work done and we had to reschedule my next routine appointment. I was talking to the secretary and she said, well, how about Tuesday, November 3rd? And I shivered because I thought, oh my God, we're going to have the fucking election and the son of a bitch may win. You know, I was terrified. So I said, okay, let's do it. And I mean, I've been a wreck all week. I was amazed actually, because I also, on Monday, I had my long delayed annual physical and my blood pressure was okay. I was amazed by that, but it was, so that's good news. Now, Tommy was with me via Zoom on election night, and I was getting quite depressed. My two sons were on. The older one is a gambler and a numbers guy, and he was in despair because the betting markets were going all for Trump. By 12:30, when I went to bed, I had convinced myself that we didn't know enough to despair yet, okay? There was a lot of votes out there, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And then when I woke up, it took me about 30 minutes of playing with numbers to realize that we were in pretty good shape, although it was going to take a long time to find out. The relief has been dawning on me all week. And today, it's really gotten to me. And for various reasons, I was cooking for myself tonight. My wife and I decided to eat separately. And I put on one of my favorite pieces of music, and it sounded so great. I mean, we dodged a bullet, okay? I mean, we preserved democracy, which really was at stake. And what's going to happen now, maybe we'll talk about that. There are all sorts of possibilities. I don't know. But this is a wonderful moment because I realize this has been very, very difficult for me living under this SOB. And at least we had the sense to put that to an end.
Alice?
So I guess to give some context for anyone that hasn't watched the pre-election video, I, in that video, said that I thought that Biden was more likely than not to win Texas. And the reason that I gave for that was basically some demographic like data that in retrospect was a bit cherry-picked. I was paying very close attention to Texas in particular on election night, basically until it was called. And as results started coming in, it became very evident that Joe Biden was doing about as well as Beto O'Rourke did in all of the suburban counties and way underperforming along the border. And I like basically those two things together, I was wrong about both. I thought that he would overperform in the suburbs and do about as well on the border, and that's why I thought that that Biden would win. I also noticed this like a similar trend as what happened along the border and in the Rio Grande Valley here in Texas, in parts of New Mexico, not as much in Nevada, seemingly in a few congressional districts in California. The Democrats massively underperformed with Hispanic voters, and they need to take a deep look at why that is. The polling had been showing it for months, and I'm guilty of having written that off because there was other polling that was showing that that wasn't the case. But the truth is that most of the polling was showing that that was going to happen, and this happened in Florida too, I should say. And again, the Democrats just kind of ignored all of that. Now, by the time that I went to bed, it seemed likely to me that Biden would, at some point, as all of the votes came in, pull ahead in at least Wisconsin and Michigan, and he did the next day. I wasn't sure about Pennsylvania yet. I knew that there was a chance at Georgia because most of the votes that were left by the time I went to bed at like 4 in the morning or whenever it was were in the Atlanta area. And as we saw, Biden appears to have, at least for the time being, pulled ahead in Georgia by about 10,000 votes or so. And then it seemed on election night that Biden was certain to win Arizona, and now maybe that's questionable, but it doesn't matter anymore because obviously Pennsylvania has been called. So by the time I went to bed, I wasn't extremely concerned, but definitely during the night I was concerned about a lot. There was a moment when I thought that the Democrats might lose the House because it was really clear to me that they were underperforming in some rural districts, and also there was a seat in New Mexico that they lost, a seat in Minnesota as well, for that matter. And again, the reasons for that, I'd love to get into at some point once we all talk about our thoughts for just how the night unfolded. Because at the moment, I'll say this much, that the Democratic Party has, in my eyes, proven that in an election that was theirs to lose, they still almost did. And I cannot help but feel that it's an embarrassing level of incompetence on the part of the Democratic Party. And I think that it has to do with the way that they went around or went about running this campaign. I think there was overconfidence in just pointing out that Trump was bad without really focusing on policies when the policies were clearly popular. We could talk about in Florida, for example, where a $15 minimum wage won, like a ballot measure for that, won by 20 points. It got more votes than either Biden or Trump did, right? And we've seen similar ballot measures for, truthfully progressive policies passing in other states, in elections throughout this year. We saw it on election night. And despite that, Biden truthfully barely won. So, that's in a nutshell, that's my take on that. But maybe we can talk more about it.
I want to add something about the data. And this is about
Hold up
Texas.
1 second, Amy. I think can you hold your point?
Uh-huh.
Because I was talking over you, saw my mouth moving. But after you share your point, then David K has to jump in to respond to Alice.
I don't have to. I was quite willing to wait. But,
Okay.
I just wanted to point something else about the data.
Okay.
Another reason that a lot of people were projecting Texas, because it is a minority state, so that so there's that demographic. It's also the third youngest state in the country, behind Utah and Alaska. And we've been hearing the mantra for 4 years about how, the Democrats have the young vote, they got the young vote, they got the young vote. But when I looked at the breakdown of the age groups in Texas, there's only one age group that Biden won, and that was under 29. And the 30 to 44-year-olds, which is pretty much most of the millennials, it was split down the middle, 50-50 between Biden and Trump. And then, of course, Trump won all of the age groups over that. And that was another reason why I really thought, okay, I don't know if Biden can do it, but he's certainly got a shot. And if this is the year for Texas to vote for a Democrat, if there was ever a year, this is the year, because there's so much momentum behind the Democrats. So I thought, and so I'm a little concerned about the age group too, because millennials didn't go for Biden.
Oh.
At least in this state, in the percentages that we are told that, they are.
I think the policy has to do with that personally, but
I just wanted to add that there was an age group thing too that bothered me, as well as, you know, the Hispanic demographic. So
I want to eventually get into the Latino. What is the proper word? Because I've seen it all over the Latino vote, the Latinx vote, or Hispanic vote.
not
Hispanic.
Latinx,
not
Yeah.
Latinx, no.
not Latinx. That is one thing that on election night people were saying.
Yeah.
Liberals, stop doing that.
Okay. And I eventually do
My
want to.
understanding, Ryan, is that most of the people we're talking about prefer Hispanic,
Right.
and
And I
certainly
wanna-
not Latinx.
And I do want to eventually get into compare and contrast that vote in Florida with like Nevada. Like I think that's the one thing everybody just lumps them in like one community and don't separate them like the Puerto Ricans,
Well,
Cubans,
yeah, I mean, but
Mexicans.
the truth
You know
is,
what
like,
I mean?
I completely agree that it's foolish to lump all of these different Hispanic groups into like one singular Hispanic group. Obviously, you know, people of Cuban heritage, people of Mexican heritage, you know, whatever else have different things that they're concerned about. But the truth of the matter is that across the board, the Democrats underperformed with Hispanic voters on Tuesday. And that tells me that there is a wider problem, that it isn't just that that, you know, Cuban voters latched on to the attacks about socialism or something like that. It's that there is truly like some disconnect with the way that the Democrats are presenting or approaching this. Basically, that it just isn't working with Hispanic voters in this election in the way that it has in the past. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but clearly the Democrats are doing something wrong here.
I want to go to David Payne, but David Kaiser, did you have one point that you wanted to respond to?
Well, I'll just question what Alice said, that this election was ours to lose. I've been looking at exit polls, and actually there's a big problem with exit polls, which I posted on the site. I've looked at two sets of exit polls, one the New York Times and one in CNN, and they were different polls.
Yeah.
And on certain key issues, they have very different results.
Yeah, and the ones from Fox News, I don't know if you've looked at
I
those,
haven't
but those
seen
have
those.
vastly different results from
right.
CNN and New York Times as well.
The CNN one says that white people, and particularly white men, shifted Democratic substantially.
Yeah.
In fact, it's mostly white men in that poll. The Times poll didn't show that shift.
Yeah.
But what I want to talk about is something else. The Times had a question. Has your economic situation in the last 4 years gotten better? And then it broke that down. How did people vote based on how they answered that question? The people who said it had gotten better voted 3-1 for Trump. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what that told me was, I hate to say it, but if it hadn't been for the pandemic and the recession, we wouldn't have had a chance. So
I think that there's
sure.
I think that there's validity to that. I will say that after 2018 and after seeing like what happened in 2018, just state by state, if in December of 2018, after all of the results were in, if someone would have shown me the election map that we have now, right? The way that it's appearing to be shaping up, I would have gone, yeah, that looks about right. The trends that we saw from 2018 altogether, they didn't really move much one way or another. They certainly, I mean, there were a few House seats that were lost, yeah. But and you know, obviously, there's what I've been saying about the Hispanic vote. But aside from that, the areas that Democrats seemed to win back in 2018, Biden won back this year. So I'm not sure if I like buy that the pandemic sunk Trump. I just think that pretty early on into this presidency, everything was locked in. And those people that say that their economic situation improved, it isn't that a whole bunch of people, like as a proportion of the country necessarily, believe that. It's just that Trump supporters are more likely to have like a rosy view of their economic situation, regardless. And maybe people that aren't going to vote, that didn't vote for Trump, are more likely to have a negative view of that as well. I think that the partisan like breakdown of people is determining their outlook more than the opposite.
So I appreciate the discussion, because there's so much in this election. As I was going through, I did not have my eyes on the data. I was not breaking down polls. I did not pay attention to the exit polls. I went through personally a very transitionary type of phase of just watching, not getting too excited, not getting too happy, because we essentially have been already given the script, in my opinion, of how this is going to go down. We knew the pandemic had interrupted voting. We knew that there were a large contingent of Democratic votes that were being asked to go ahead and mail in their ballots. We knew that because of the mail-in ballots, there was going to be a delay. We had already been told that there was, we've been talking about fraud for I don't know how many months. So we kind of had a very good idea as to what the scenario of ideas are going to play out. And so I was talking to my mother, and I kind of likened it to me just watching a car crash. Just watching, and just sitting there. Traffic's not going anywhere. We're all stuck on 95. Let's just keep our eyes on this to see if, what happens. And I find myself still in that phase. I have not, much to the chagrin of some people who I will not name, I have not started celebrating. I have not claimed it as a victory. I'm still very much so trying to, there's a story in the Bible, in Judges, I think, where it talks about Gideon having collected men and having to separate men between those who cupped the water in their hands and lapped it like a dog so they could keep their eyes out on the horizon, and those who just knelt down and just kind of drank water. I'm still looking at the horizon. 2019 and 2020 has been such a ride that I find myself consistently looking on the horizon for what's coming next. What is going to be the next thing? And I have fashioned myself, whether it's correct or not, to not get comfortable, and to unfortunately not even really trust this period of peace where we should be celebrating. And what I say, for those who felt as though their will was imposed on election night, celebrating in that instance, I'm being very, very, very much so pessimistic, and I'm kind of okay with that, because what really hit me in my heart was something that I think Alice hit on, and even David was reaching to as well, was for me, I was hit with a profound sadness during the results they were coming in, and that was when I saw that Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham, that when I saw them both reelected, that to me signified everything that I needed to know. I speak for myself, and I know I speak for myself here, but I think I find it very hard to swallow an insistence on our, and I say this again from a public media standpoint, friends, family, those people, an insistence to really hone in on Donald Trump, and to really utilize him as the linchpin of all the things that are going wrong, when there are other areas where the problems that we're seeing, the difficulties that we have, there is more than enough blame to go around, and it does not just rest on one particular person. And for me, when I saw those two people, when I saw them reelected, that was a sign to me that this is okay. We can win the election, Trump can be removed from office, but I see some things here that have ceased to change and have not changed yet. To Alice's point, I think again, to Alice and David's point, because I think you two both had excellent points, talking about the Latino vote, again, I can't necessarily speak to that. I say Latino vote, Hispanic vote. I can't speak to that because I'm not Hispanic. But I look there and I see the same problems that have been applied to the Black and African American vote in this country, which is this myth of a monolithic vote. You have, even right now in this country, you're starting to see and really starting to get down into how it's such a mistake to look at the black vote as a monolithic vote. Because when you talk about black, you're now talking about African American, you're talking about Caribbean American, you're talking about Africans, you're talking about all these different now cultural intersects that can identify as black, but may now also not identify as black. On the Hispanic vote, again, I never even understood how we even attempted to go down that path, because you're literally talking about people from different countries whose
That don't like
experiences.
each other.
Well, I'm sorry. No, no.
I mean, seriously, like having a lot of contact with different Hispanic communities,
Yes.
different nationalities tend not to get along.
You're absolutely right, and we see
And
that in my state.
yeah, and we see it in mine all the time. I had a 911 call one time, and I'll never forget it. I had an El Salvadorian caller because we have a very large El Salvadorian population. And I forget, I didn't know at the time what nationality the interpreter was, because they could be from all over the world. Right? But the interpreter started cussing out my caller, who was in the middle of an emergency situation, and just thought, oh, they thought they could get away with it, that I didn't speak any Spanish, and I speak enough to swear. And I wound up putting in a complaint and getting them in trouble. But yeah, like there is a lot of nationalistic animosity between Hispanic populations.
To Alice's point, I think what we saw was a moment to where the Democratic Party could not and should not be the one to deliver that monolithic message that they think could just speak to an entire block of people. And we saw that with what Stacey Abrams and the just amazing organizers in Georgia did, with actually taking on the work that the Democratic Party should have been doing in the first place, organizing, strategizing, mobilizing, and getting down there and actively getting people out there to vote. And if we utilize that as a blueprint to these, and again, not to the Hispanic vote, but to these different communities that are down in Florida, that are around the country, I think that then we've been given a model that clearly works in this area. Because had it not been for that, we're looking at a completely different outcome to this election, completely. Again, to the point that Amy was making earlier, I think again you look at this situation, and we look at a pandemic. We look at a failed impeachment attempt. We look at scandals. We look at people locked up. We look at people convicted. We look at all of these different things. And the overarching sadness that I had on election night was not necessarily that I felt that the Democratic Party had the absolute number, my favorite candidate for this position. But you look at all of the things that were stacked up over the course of this year and over the course of this presidency that indicated what may have been going on, and the fact that overwhelmingly almost half of this country's vote was not swayed by that. We still saw a large contingent of people, even larger than I thought that we ever dared think was going to vote in that manner, still voted for it. On days when we were still recording the highest days of coronavirus deaths, when there still is there's no immunization that's out there. When we're still trying to deal with what a second wave could look like, not even talking about the economy, not talking about the failed attempt to get a stimulus package out there. All of these different things are stacking up, and yet the country still voted the way that they did. That, to me, in my house, with my children and my wife, it terrified me. It terrified me because all of the deepest fears that I've held as a black man in this country seem to be yet again validated by the way that people were voting. And it's not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling I'm not going to pull a Van Jones. I'm not going to do all that stuff. But it's. I think what it really revealed was, as I'm driving to and fro throughout the state, and you're watching TV and you're on boards, you could feel the momentum that the Republican vote had. You could see it. It was palpable. It was real, and it didn't have to be a Trump rally on the corner of the street. It didn't have to be, a rally of Republicans here and there, but you could feel that there was momentum that was definitely there. But to actually see that wave come in while you're standing on the shore was very, very alarming, I would say. And it's, again, it's not just, talking about the ideological differences that you might have as a member of one party or a member of another party, even if you're just an independent. But when you look at literally all the things that we had tangible proof and data on, the things that we could see, touch, and feel throughout this country, and it still was not enough, almost not enough to sway it in the direction of at least trying something that this has been bad, really bad for us. Let's try something different. The fact that it almost didn't work, that really shook me. That shook me on that night, and that's why I was, again, I was very hesitant to see, because we can, and I say we pejoratively, but a Democrat can sit in that seat of president, and it could be a historic night. Matter of fact, I'll share a tweet I shared with Ryan that really kind of sums up, I think, my feelings. Someone tweeted out, a Donnie Rose tweeted out, I just want to say that it's possible to be happy that Trump was not reelected, and not be thrilled about a Biden presidency, and be proud of Kamala making history, and be skeptical about what the future of this nation holds. All of those feelings are valid, especially if you're black. I couldn't kind of encapsulate that in any other better way for me. And again, for me, for my household and my children. And it's a stark reminder to me, I think. I think you look at, in this country, all the different racial tensions that have been stoked and have been on fire all throughout this year. And I think, again, pejoratively, what I'm seeing is the same fear that people have when police officers may have, or when a first responder goes out and you see a person of color, there's someone who may be armed. That same fear that exists of a black man is that same fear I'm feeling on the opposite side when I walk through my neighborhood and I look at where these votes wound up, and I don't know what a person did when they went inside that voting booth. Exit poll strategies, all these different things. There's a statistical proof when we look at all the votes that are tabulated, that there's a good chance that people who either you didn't think were going to vote a certain way, or that people who told you they weren't going to vote a certain way did indeed vote a certain way. And that, to me, is frightening, and a reminder that you don't always know. You don't always know. So, Amy, I went ahead. I'm the wet blanket. Sorry, I'm done.
You know what? And I just want to add that. Okay, I'm with you 100, 1,000%, David. But we sat here and we talked about that the Democrats need to do something with the Hispanics, and I think that the Democrats are also taking the younger people for granted too, and just assuming that they're going to get their vote. And they better stop doing it. They better stop doing it. Because if we can lose this block of voters, they did not do as well with the younger voters as they had expected to. I don't care whether they were black, Hispanic, white, whatever, it didn't happen. So I just want to
And just a note too, that Trump won white, younger, like 18 to. I was just looking at the polls. Trump won white people in every single age demographic. Yeah.
Is this really quick question? Is this? I assume that this is all from exit polls, which I do have basically two concerns about trying to extrapolate a whole lot from the exit polls.
You're probably gonna say what I'm going to say.
One being that we have kind of expected that the exit polling, due to it being more than likely people in person on election day, is going to be more favorable for Trump with certain demographics. More importantly, clearly the polls were not right this election in general. There were a lot of things that we thought based on polling that didn't turn out to be true. And if we're going to accept that, then I think that we also need to accept that maybe we need to be a little bit more critical with how we're looking at all of these other polls as well. I'm more interested in discussing the results that we've seen, like from different counties in different states, as well as talking about some of the ballot measures that we've seen pass in different states, because I think that that gives a better picture of where the American public actually is than focusing on some exit polls or even on just regular polling data that clearly has a flaw in the methodology somewhere.
And both sides definitely both sides brag that they pulled in more voters than ever in history. And so I'm also curious, who are these new voters? Like, who did Trump pull in? Who did Biden pull in? So, I mean, let's even look at that. Go on, David.
Very quickly, there's another dimension to that which everybody is forgetting. There were 5 million, more than 5 million third-party votes last time.
Yeah.
This year, it's very, very few. Those votes were mostly picked up by Biden, apparently. So that is part of the increase on both sides, although it's true that the turn-up is up anyway.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I want to mention that I hope nobody is offended, I don't think anybody will be, but it really jumped at me looking at these figures, and I've looked at the 2016 figures and the 2012 figures. Measuring it by the vote she got, Hillary Clinton was just a terrible candidate. She got many, many less votes than Barack Obama did the last time, and she got many, many less votes than Joe Biden. A lot of people just didn't want to vote for her, and that is probably the biggest single reason that Donald Trump became president.
I can't back it up. I mean, everyone wants to talk about the Rust Belt vote and this belt. I mean, we lost that. I just think people didn't like her in 2016. That's what it came down to.
Yeah, I think so too.
And that's why
I
we
mean,
even for Biden
I
to
voted
back.
for her because
Look,
she's a Democrat, but I never liked her either.
I agree that Hillary Clinton was a terrible candidate. After Tuesday, I will add that Joe Biden was also a terrible candidate.
Oh, I don't know about that.
No, listen to me.
Yeah,
Listen to me. Okay.
He wasn't my first choice.
If we want to talk about vote margins, right? Hillary Clinton, she won the popular vote by 3 million votes, right? It was still way less than in total votes that Barack Obama won. Sure, Joe Biden, yeah, he will win more votes. He already has, from what's been counted, won more votes than Barack Obama did in 2008. That's true. Obama won the popular vote by a margin of 10 million. When this is all said and done, Joe Biden will probably have won the popular vote by half of that. Okay?
Right.
But that assumes that someone could have done better. And Biden, I don't think that there's a candidate besides Biden. Maybe there was a couple more who would have been able to be amenable to who would have been acceptable to like the never Trumper Republicans and things. Like, I don't know that the Lincoln Project would not have gone that hard at Trump.
I'm going to be honest. I don't think that the never Trumper Republicans actually showed up that much against Trump. I don't see it in how anything, like in any trends looking at 2018 on to now, it didn't happen.
Yeah, it didn't.
I see it in one trend, which is that, and the Times agreed on this, educated white people went against Trump.
Well, okay, but
that happened in 2018. Would they have been turned off by somebody like Bernie Sanders? At this point, I really don't think so. I don't think that people that voted Democrat down the line in 2018, right, that were saying that they were going to vote blue no matter who.
Yes, but that's exactly the point, is that a lot of these people were based, and you're talking about not looking at exit polls, looking at the actual races. Look at how many people voted for Biden and then voted Republican down ballot. Would they have done that with Bernie Sanders at the top of the ticket? I'm not making that bet. But really quickly, just quickly on the point of exit polls, I just wanted to clarify, because David was saying that he saw discrepancies between CNN and New York Times, and I was quite sure that that I know CNN is part of the consortium that uses Edison Research for exit polls. And New York Times also uses the same thing. So, and I was looking now, New York Times shows some different questions, but if you like look at the questions that are exactly the same on both, they're exactly the same numbers. So there shouldn't be any discrepancy between those two. I haven't found a discrepancy for any of the questions that are identical, but I noticed that sometimes there's questions that are on the New York Times one that aren't on CNN. So I just want to make that point for the viewers. Yeah.
I also think that Joe Biden was a terrible candidate. You know, I hate the term Sleepy Joe because it's mean-spirited, but let's face it, guys, he's got no energy. And now this is not to say that he's going to be a bad president, because I do think that he's a deeply empathetic, kind, caring person. I'm not trying to knock Joe Biden at all, okay? Not at all. I think he's a good man. But he wasn't an exciting candidate. He just wasn't.
I do wish he tackled the socialist claims a little bit better.
It's pretty funny when
he didn't do that at all.
It's pretty funny when when the primaries were happening and everything. I mean, Joe Biden was there. I was like, okay, fine. That seems, because I was expecting that before Bo passed away. So I was expecting it, but I don't think I was necessarily going to vote for him, because I'm a little bit of an ageist, because he is mad old, and I'm like, I hope he can make it. Also, it's just as far as like getting some like fresh ideas and fresh blood. What I do like about him, he wasn't my first choice, but what I do like about him is that it seems as though he listens to people, and he does, and he does like take everyone's like fresh ideas, because I think he admits himself like, hey, look at me, I'm oatmeal. Like, I need some raisin, I need some brown sugar, I need some like all this other stuff to like mix it up a bit. So I respect him for that. But no, he wasn't my first choice. Like Elizabeth Warren was my first choice, just because I think she was like the most,
mine too,
next to Biden, like the most qualified and slightly younger, but also like she knew her shit.
I think that Elizabeth Warren would have done better too. And really,
I love Elizabeth Warren.
I fundamentally believe here is that the policies that the Democrats claim to support, their healthcare policy, their environmental policies, wanting a $15 minimum wage, the education policies, you can go down the list here. These are extremely important policies, or popular in policies, I mean.
And I just also want to
They have done a terrible job at actually getting it across that this is what they are wanting to fight for.
And I would like to also add that people are like, well, what are those people voted for Bernie Sanders? Okay, I don't know how they ran races in other states, but in Texas, the people who did not vote for Biden, what I heard from them straight down the line, and this was the talking point, I'm not voting for Biden because he's a communist. Okay, so the whole socialist thing, and no, they went from in the beginning he was a socialist.
It worked anyway.
He was a communist all the way through.
But those annoys the crap out of me though. Like, that just annoys me.
And it's like it doesn't matter what Democrat you would have had. They would have stuck that label on them, and it would have stuck.
The Republicans will say that the Democrat is a communist no matter what. But it's that 2% of people, that 2% of independents though, who aren't going to think that Joe Biden is a socialist, but think that Bernie Sanders is a socialist and are scared by that. That makes the difference in elections. Yes, he is.
Tommy, when you listen to the people who
he's not socialist.
The Republican, the Trump supporters, but those are not the people that needed to win.
But here's the problem. I think here's what needs to happen, though. I think that a lot of people need to be educated on what socialism actually is, because I think it's such a dirty word, and they throw it around so much that it's like such a bad thing. But is it really? And if you think about it,
from socialist platforms.
So, and then of course I posted this earlier, but like if you think about it, like socialism, fascism, which one are you gonna choose? Like which one has caused the most damage? And no one's talking about fascism.
But
I mean, we're in like a democratic. This is a democracy.
I spend a lot of time talking about fascism. I spend a lot of time talking about
I'm like, how do you not see
I
that
do
there's
miss
and also
Obama.
fascism
talking
around here?
I do
about
miss how
how
Obama was.
socialism and fascism and well, not just in my opinion, in a theoretical sense, are both responses to the failings of neoliberal capitalism.
That's true.
So, and the truth of the matter is that neoliberal like we're reaching a point where that system isn't working anywhere near as well as it used to. And that's how we've gotten to this point. So
Yeah.
I see it as inevitable that one of the two, whether it's socialism or fascism, it is eventually going to be the road that we go, because this system is not sustainable.
Yeah, I mean the COVID pandemic, like that just kind of
well, that's
poked
one
so
of many
holes in
things.
everything.
So,
We're like, oh wait, no, we have nothing planned.
with that in mind, like I do agree, people really need to sit back and think, like, which do they prefer here? Now everything that I just said there, that maybe should be cut out, because
No, because that's setting me up.
Yeah.
That is,
share?
I couldn't ask for a better platform. Thank you.
No, thank me. I set you up. I know what I was doing.
Excuse me. I need to ask Alice a question, because
Sure.
Amy has talked about her kids. Are you the finance person or the theater person?
I am the accounting and finance
Right.
major
Okay.
that
Okay.
that is also a market socialist. Yeah.
That's what I wanted. That's what I thought, but I wanted to be sure.
And David, you met Alice years ago in the coffee shop in Denton.
I remember that. That was quite a while ago. But yes.
Could I share my share my election experience real quick, because it's a little bit different. I didn't watch anything. I didn't follow anything until yesterday, because because I knew it was going to take a long time. I had a feeling it was going to take a long time. I don't like having anxiety. I like my sleep, and I was like, you know what, I don't need it. So my husband was the one who was watching everything. He wouldn't tell me what was going on, and I was like, just tell me when it's over. I'll watch all the news things. I'll watch the highlights and everything. But the energy that I got from him was pretty grim and very stressed. You know, he was pretty stressed out the whole time. And then seeing it after everything was done, it was like surprising, but also not surprising how split it was and how close the race was. Because you would think, oh, the Democrats have it in the bag. But of course, what Democrats do is not necessarily think about what needs to change about their strategy and not get too cocky, which is what happened in 2016. And even though they tried to like open it up a little bit with the primaries by having so many people, like it eventually went the way that you kind of predicted it would, which sucked. But it just, just seeing it from like the retrospective side and just kind of looking and see like how things were going, it was interesting to see how close. It was just a little disheartening to see how close everything was. And to speaking to David's point, like you did, David Payne, you were the wet blanket, but you are absolutely 100% right.
I just want to say, Catherine and David. I just want to say, Catherine and David, we had an election night party, and we watched the results for in 2008 when Obama won.
Yeah. And that was great.
And somebody asked me, Ryan, are you going to have an election party in 2020? I was like, no, because I already know I'm going to be frustrated, disappointed. I'm going to be hitting the refresh button all night long.
The 2016 election party was just like, I think election parties just stopped after 2016 because we were like,
not
for me. Lifelong habit. I'm never going to get it.
I spent that election. I had a couple bags ready just in case we needed to get out of our city.
Oh no.
Yeah, no. I was literally like leading up to the election. I had been Googling, probably still will be Googling like countries Americans can seek asylum.
Oh no.
Refreshing. Seeing articles like what countries will accept us. Oh wait, there's a pandemic. No countries are accepting anybody.
Yeah.
Never mind.
All right, so I've got to say that while everybody else is big on the numbers, obviously, and the polling and this and that, to me, that's social chemistry. I'm more into social physics. So on Sunday, coming out of, I'm going to work, I'm pulling on to 66, and there is one of those Trump caravans, similar to the one that messed with the Biden campaign bus in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And I had seen that story already. And I pull on, and there they are, slowing up traffic, doing this whole thing. And I sat there, and I'm like, an election winner, people who are about to win, they don't do this, right?
Yeah.
The action, the trajectory, right there on Sunday, I knew what was coming by Friday. Now, I also knew that it was going to be a slow burn, mostly because I've watched Trump. He is a nitpick, litigious sissy, and he can't handle not getting his own way. He can't. He has to find any little technicality in the rule book. It's just like all
Or
his
make it up.
bankruptcies.
Or make it up.
Yeah, you know
Make
what?
it up.
That's
You know
a
what,
sign of a
Phil? When it
loser.
comes to when it comes to the physics, or if you're talking about like just seeing like what's happening and like what the reading the room.
Yes.
As soon as Ruth Bader Ginsburg died and they jumped on that seat, I was like, oh, they think they're gonna lose. They're
It's
scrambling.
bingo.
Yes,
They're scrambling.
absolutely. It's
Yes.
all that stuff, and it all added up. And I
Right.
knew going in, I'm like, winners don't act like this, right? And so when Tuesday came around, I'm sitting there like, I'm not gonna even bother with the election. I'm not gonna watch anything. I'm not gonna do anything. But you know what? That damn map is so mesmerizing. You put up a map of the United States and put in anything and color code it and say this means this and this, I will look at it.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if it's average pairs of underwear owned by average resident or whatever. I will look at that. So I wound up just watching the stupid map change colors. I don't even like Joe Biden. I don't even like Donald Trump. I think they're both idiots. But the map, I love the map.
The map is the reason why I stayed there too. Thank you for helping me realize
I'm in
that.
it for the map.
Because
like,
I like you. I knew that the minute that he started suing people, Trump started suing people, I knew that he was a loser. That's a sign of a loser.
Yeah.
But that map is what kept me going. That map is what I kept refreshing. It's so true. Yeah.
The map is beautiful.
Right.
And I will, it's hypnotic. I
Right.
can't stop. And they added light blue, so for the leaning. Oh yeah.
It's like
More
just freaking
colors,
it's just mind games right there. It's like, oh, is it gonna stay blue or is it gonna go to a light red?
Yeah, you're the whole time you're like, and
I
I'm
will
far
say-
left. Like they're like kind of like David, who's sitting there like, I'm watching the horizon. I'm far left. I'm watching the horizon because I know that Trump's corporate side, they're not done. They're going to sue everything,
Yeah.
from here till January.
Yeah, I think as long as he stays in the country, and I hope that the Democrats take advantage of this, is that he just stays in the country and hopefully, arrest him, I guess, like after inauguration. That would be beautiful.
Well,
Will it
yeah,
happen?
I mean, but then the other side to it is there are all these fascists running around. And speaking of the social physics, and I'm talking real militant fascists.
Yeah.
Speaking of the social physics, they're all acting like this is their last stand.
They are.
And the secession is happening too. This even on social media. Now they're leaving Facebook and they're going to Parler. It's
Yeah, I mean,
gonna
personally,
happen.
I'd almost argue that's a good thing, because if they're like self-isolating is a word to use, themselves onto these other social media platforms, people that are going to do that are already too far gone anyway. And
Well,
they're
I just want to make sure
we
they're
saw
not going
this
to be
last
flying
time.
any
Further, they're
My
looking
problem-
for
they're not
radicals.
spreading. They're not spreading. Yeah, exactly. They're radical.
Nah,
Whatever.
the problem is we saw this last time. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, man, we thought we had them on the ropes. We thought they were gone.
Yeah.
And they just went over to the heavy metal scene where they could start off and be low key. And that's why you have all this National Socialist black metal now.
Well, yeah. I mean, what I'm worried about is all of the like in the gaming scene is that there's a lot of fascists there. So
Yeah. There's a lot of them, and they come out. They find a way.
But
And
ultimately, what I was saying is that from the perspective of the left, and you and I are both in different ways rather far left, I do believe that on the left, our enemy being neoliberal capitalism is vastly preferable to it being fascism.
I agree. I agree, but like I've been telling a lot of my other far left friends, in this situation, we now have to have our boot on the necks of the fascists,
Yeah,
and our fingers in the neoliberal space.
we have to pull the neoliberals over. That's all that we really can do. We have to show them why Joe Biden isn't going to work.
Well, I liked what Catherine was saying about, Joe Biden will listen. I see it more as Joe Biden can be bullied, and
I don't think he can because
I'll enjoy bullying. I'll enjoy bullying Biden.
Democrats didn't win the Senate. They aren't going to
That's
accomplish anything.
David, what did you want to say?
Yeah, David.
Okay, two things. I put a link up in the chat. This goes to things we were talking about earlier. It's an interview by Glenn Lowry, who's a centrist black economist. He interviewed me. He did the interview. The key is the person he was interviewing, a sociologist whose husband, he and his wife, have written a book called Trump's Democrats. And what they did over the last 4 years, they identified 10 towns all over the country who had never voted for any Republican and voted for Donald Trump. And they went to some of them to try to figure out what's going on. And they decided it's a cultural thing. And I'm going to use a word they didn't use, but it's the word I would use. Trump is a pre-modern guy, okay, with pre-modern values. It's what makes him like a mob don. You're either with him or against him. If you're his enemy, he has nothing but contempt for you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the people in these communities are used to this. They're used to this among local leaders, and it's kind of what they expect as a leader. And they also got around to pointing out that this view has a lot of adherence in some Black and Hispanic communities. It's something that they're used to too, and that may explain the increasing support there. But the second thing I wanted to say, Ryan said we wanted to talk about Trump's response. I am really frightened about this because, I mean, we've never had an ex-president like this. Okay, it's like we overthrew the dynasty. Okay, it's like 1688 in England.
The Mad
And
King.
the thing is, when you did that, when you overthrew the dynasty, there was only one thing to do, which was to get their asses out of your goddamn country and keep them there. And I mean, he may do that voluntarily, but that's what we need to do. I mean, I am really afraid that the guy is going to go on his own TV show, or possibly on Fox, and start rallying his troops and inciting them to worse things than he's incited them while he was in office. So, I mean, this is a dangerous situation. And he's going to be riding herd on the Republican Party, who are scared shitless of him and scared to do anything against him. So I am worried about that. And I'm wondering if Biden is eventually going to have to be like Lincoln and suspend habeas corpus to lock a lot of these people up, which is in the Constitution, by the way, for good reason. In time of invasion or rebellion, it's okay. So we'll
I'm gonna jump in on David K, because I just had to put my hands up because I felt that David was preaching to my soul. I felt like he had peered inside my mind and was praying. And again, reminder, I'm the pessimist. I'm the wet blanket of this group. This is all my worst case scenario fears. to draw in a little bit of what Phil was saying before, when you look at the social physics, I looked at the social physics, the same thing you guys were saying. I looked at those things, and yes, I saw signs that they would lose because, again, we knew that there was going to be a massive turnout of mail-in votes that eventually was going to turn the tide. But what I saw was irregular behavior, and so winners don't act like that, but lunatics do. I'm not calling people who voted for him lunatics, but I'm saying these people who take fanaticism to the next level, like those people do. Leaders and presidents don't carry themselves in the manner in which we've seen portrayed over the last 4 years, but dictators and wannabe strongmen and insecure people carry themselves in this way. And so I think it's I don't want to get too much into it, but I just think it's very interesting that I think we have to be careful, and this goes to the point that Alice was making a little bit earlier. We have to be careful with this labeling that we are doing, both within and without. From a Democratic perspective, to labeling who's Democrat, who's far left, who's far right, to the Hispanic, who's Hispanic, who's not. All these labeling that we're doing, I think we have to be really, really careful about that, because there's always that inherent built-in factor by me ascribing a label to you, that I'm wrong. And if I'm making my moves based upon what I think that my label that I've ascribed to you says, then I can very much so find myself and my country on the verge of not knowing where we're going to be when we wake up in the morning, because I've gotten it completely wrong. My polls are wrong, my adjustments are wrong, all these different things are wrong. And to Ryan's point too, or really to the point that was being brought up earlier about some of these fascists and some of these people who really have these hard beliefs, I think what we've seen culticism and fanaticism to the nth degree in some of this area. We've seen a carrying on of these symbols, like this. I'm going to grab onto this flag. I'm going to grab onto this symbol. I'm going to grab onto this, and just really following these things fervently, when it just seems like we're losing nationally what we're supposed to be as a country. And it's just getting lost, to the point that was brought up a little bit earlier about the messages and the fanaticism and the things that are out there. I don't necessarily want those populations to disappear off into their own platform like Parler, or disappear into their own chat rooms and things like that. I think it's important that we take the information that we received from this election, and we really need to acknowledge that this split and this division is out there. So in Florida, in our little retention ponds and the canals that we have, if we see a gator, you're required to call animal services. It could be a 2-foot gator, 3-foot gator, 6-foot gator. You don't know. But if you see an alligator out there, you call animal services. You don't just let it go back into the canal, because that 2-foot gator could come back in a couple months and all of a sudden it's a 6-foot gator. It's important that we take the information that we're receiving from this election and we actually utilize it to take a good long look at where we are in this country and start speaking to those divisions. That's something I don't disagree with Biden on. I definitely do think we should be reaching out to try to understand our enemies, but we also need to really understand where we are as a country, and take notice of where those faults are. And just having someone or having a group just go off in a corner and lick their wounds, and giving them the space and the time and the energy to regroup, when they have already shown throughout these last 4 years that they're okay with assaulting the Constitution on a regular basis, I don't think that's a wise strategy.
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
Yeah, I think it's important to talk to the other side. I wouldn't even call them enemies as much as I would love to, but just to talk to understand really why. What is it that they're afraid of, what is it that they hold true, and what are they afraid of with the other side? What are they afraid of that's going to be taken away? Because I can tell you, they're afraid of communism, but I'm thinking of the sides who have more to lose. The Democratic side has a lot more to lose if Trump was reelected than if Trump was not reelected. The Trump supporters have very little
They
to
feel they're
lose.
losing America. I've had interactions with multiple conservatives who said that America is lost. America, the country.
So they're afraid of
Yeah.
losing the country and not like their personal
No,
social
I
Okay.
have,
beliefs or
I
development.
have something that I want to,
They don't
okay,
even-
Catherine, what are they afraid of? Okay, now,
Yeah, I'd like to know.
okay, I will tell you, and this was the point I was trying to make earlier, because I have probably more Republican, okay, I'm going to use the Republican, because these people were not crazy 4 years ago, all right? So I'm going to just say Republican or conservative. I probably have more conservatives on my Facebook social media page than I have Democrats because of where I live right now and where I grew up. And so these are people that I've known my whole life. And I sit there and I read all their posts and all their comments and their conversation back and forth. They are convinced, absolutely convinced, that the Democrats are communists and that Joe Biden, his presidency, is the end of democracy. Just like how we look at Trump and go, oh my goodness, that we're going to lose our country to fascism, they truly believe. And I can tell you, no, they're not, no, this is what they truly believe because, and they're not just spewing stuff, just, no, this is how they think. And so that was my point. It doesn't matter who would have been running on the Democratic ticket. They would have called him a communist or her a communist. That doesn't matter. And I don't, I don't listen to their private conversations to know where this is coming from. And so I don't know what's going on in the right-wing media world that I'm not a part of. But I think that must be part of the propaganda that's coming. They've convinced people.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is crazy because isn't it in the Constitution?
And I do know that this parlor place that right down the line, every single one of them is abandoning Facebook and going to. There are elected Republicans at the federal level, state level, all the way down to the local level that are also on this site. And they're not the moderate no, it's the Ted Cruz's, it's the Matt Gaetz. These are the people that are on this same platform. And so it's the way it's
Ryan, you're muted.
Yeah. And also on the site are probably the
nuts.
Saudis and the Russians and everybody else
Yeah.
connected to the.
And there are a lot of Nazis on there too.
Well,
Like,
all right.
So
Yeah.
I personally don't feel, I disagree with Alice that it's no big deal. Let them go in their own little space.
Well,
no, I think
I
want to see them.
I think that's dangerous.
Well, I want to say something, and I was have been trying to get this in sort of to add on to what David Payne was saying a little bit ago about how we are categorizing people into whatever label and how that's not helpful. Every person that has spoken in this panel has just done exactly what I was about to criticize. Okay? The truth of the matter is the Democratic Party has, ever since Trump was elected, maybe before then too, but without a doubt, in the time since Trump was elected, we've talked a lot about how the Democrats have, sort of wrote off the Hispanic vote as just being a given that they'll get that. They write off the black vote as being a given that they'll get that. They write off the white working class vote as being a given that they won't, right? And what that has led to is this mindset among liberals that the white working class in this country are like just a bunch of deplorables and a complete lost cause.
And all white.
Well, sure. The point that I'm making is that, again, the policies that we're talking about here are policies that are, if they were to be implemented, would be helping everyone, right? healthcare reform, education reform, that brings everyone up. The messaging has been missed.
It's wild because, like,
did you read, real quick, Alice, did you read the policy platform for Donald Trump on his website?
He had
That's
policy
70
platform?
million people.
Which thing are you?
No, that's the point. 70 million people voted for Donald Trump, to include a lot of these white working class people. We keep talking about policy, and it kills me to say that policy doesn't matter. But the fact is that 70 million Americans just showed that they could care less, because Donald Trump did not have a policy section. The Republican Party didn't have a platform and said it's just whatever Trump does. Trump didn't have a policy platform.
Trump didn't have any policy. The Democrats didn't do a good didn't do a good job at showing that they had any policy.
But what I'm saying is it's assuming
in the eyes
that
of all of
policy
these voters,
matters.
nobody had any policy.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is, unfortunately, it may just not be the case that for a huge portion of the electorate, policy just doesn't matter, and it comes down to emotion.
The way that I see it, you have a lot of people that feel like they've been left behind by the Democratic Party, right? And what I'm saying is that the Democrats have, instead of trying to address that, have just thrown in the towel.
They cry a lot. Catherine, you had a point, and then David Kaiser is next.
I was going to say that it's crazy when you're talking about, like, how when Amy was talking about how people are so afraid, like they're convinced that the Democrats are communists. I don't know, like, what exactly they think is going to happen, but I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, it's either the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. It says right there, all men are created equal. That's all they're trying to do.
Declaration.
That's all that is. Like, that's all their policy is making sure everyone has equality. And if that's what they mean by communism, then they have that completely wrong.
Yeah,
and they're not looking at, like, oh, this is what the country's built on.
I really don't understand what the fear is, because they feel like our democracy is collapsing if Joe Biden is elected.
It's because they're convinced that the Democrats are a front for, well, the neoliberal establishment.
And they're not even thinking about they're not even thinking about how certain politicians will choose to follow their party over the good of the country. They don't get that.
Yes, and thank you, Catherine, because this is the other thing that has been bothering me for the last 24 hours, because I'm one of these people that, actions speak louder than words a lot of times. And we all had expected that Trump was going to refuse to concede. Okay, we all knew he was going to do that.
We knew he was going to claim
no
fraud.
No surprise. But what bothers me is that all of these high-ranking and high-profile Republican officials are mimicking what he's saying, throwing out things like illegal votes. And yes, we need to count the votes, but we can't count the illegal votes. And talking about how this election is not over. And the only Republicans that I have seen that have come out and acknowledged that Biden actually won has been Mitt Romney and Will Hurd, who is a Texas congressman who's retiring. And the fact that the Republicans are not saying, no, bud, you're done.
I don't
that
care about the
bothers
politicians.
me.
I'm just talking about the people. I truly do believe that
But that's not the point. They're going to follow what their leaders.
Sure. What I'm saying is I truly do believe that most of the Republican base has just been duped by Tucker Carlson and people like that are extremely effective at weaponizing populist rhetoric into right-wing ideology.
That's not my point.
My point is that if we do not figure out how to combat that and to counter that, then come 2024, we're going to lose again. That's all that I'm saying.
I agree with that.
No, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I'm trying to tie this into something that David Kaiser was talking about.
And then David Kaiser goes next.
When he talked about how, sometimes things get so bad that, maybe we need to extend habeas corpus. If we have high-ranking Republican officials like Kevin McCarthy that is agreeing that and going along with this, then I'm sorry that they are not withholding the oaths that they took to uphold and defend the Constitution. This is more than just an ethics violation. I mean, this is bad. And if they are going to, we cannot reasonably let people hold public office of this importance when they are intentionally trying to undermine the democratic process and sow doubt in the election. And that's what these people are doing. They're going on Fox News, and these are high profile leaders of the Republican Party. And whether or not people have been brainwashed by Tucker Carlson doesn't matter, because they are also going to follow the lead of the elected Republican officials who are acting exactly like Tucker Carlson.
Not
And
if we
I
make
think,
them
and I
realize
have,
that they've been
and I have
lied
a
to.
problem with that. And this is why I'm with David Payne. I'm with David Kaiser, and I think I'm with everyone on this panel who's like, this ain't over, folks.
Well,
This
no,
ain't
it's not over. I'm
Jump
not
in,
saying
David
that it's
Kaiser.
over.
Jump
I'm
in.
talking about going forward. The way that we need, like, we need to change the way that we're going about things going forward rhetorically, because what we've been doing isn't working. That's all.
Okay, that's fine. I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about getting to what happens next. But anyways, I want to hear David Kaiser.
Yeah, David Kaiser,
Okay.
go on.
Three quick things. First of all, I just want to thank Ryan and everybody else. It's been a great discussion. There are people on this discussion with whom I have had major disagreements on hot button issues, and it means a lot to me that has not prevented us from having this discussion, et cetera, et cetera. Second point, yeah, about acknowledging the other side. I just want to mention again, I saw Van Jones' famous breakdown, and then a minute after that, there was another moment which for me was equally moving, because they went over to Rick Santorum, who I can't stand, but he was talking about the outcome. He was acknowledging it. He was trying to be magnanimous. And then he said, and Van, I do want you to know that on my side of the fence, a lot of people are feeling the same fears that people on your side were feeling.
Yeah.
And Van Jones looked him right in the eye and nodded a couple of times. And if I had been there, I would have given him a hug and a kiss. I just thought that was great.
Mhm.
Lastly, and this is addressed to Alice more than anybody else, I have been saying for 4 years on History Unfolding, the election of Donald Trump proved that our political system had completely collapsed, because neither party could come up with somebody who could beat him.
Yeah.
It's really more the Republicans' party problem than anybody else. Now he's taken over the Republican Party. And that's because the people don't have any confidence, huge numbers of people don't have any confidence in the parties to meet their needs.
Yeah.
And we have this terrible situation where poor white people vote one way and poor non-white people vote the other way for the most part, which is catastrophic. And which is completely the opposite of what it was when I was your age.
Well, I mean,
by the way. So it's going to take a long time to fix this. But you're quite right.
The Democratic Party is completely, and I mean, the Republican Party, it's in their interest for people to not have any sort of class consciousness. The Democratic Party traditionally would benefit from that, but they become under the control of people that also, it isn't in their benefit for people to have class consciousness. And lacking that is what has gotten us into this situation, in my opinion, because I think that there's a lot of people that if it was if intersectional thought and the fact that the struggles that come from in class oppression are that there's similarities between that and other forms of oppression as well. I think that a lot of the outrage about the culture war or whatever you might have among a lot of these, again, white working class voters would not be as much of the case. But the Democrats, again, in my opinion, have completely dropped the ball on even attempting.
Well, the Democrats didn't drop.
It's not in the in the interest of the people that control the party to do that.
Okay,
well, the Democrats didn't drop the ball. The Democrats they have always been a liberal party. And
Well-
that's the reality. Liberalism
Yeah.
is extreme individualism and extreme capitalism. Those are the poles, right? And they've always pushed that. Extreme individualism, extreme capitalism. There was a brief point
Certainly
in the 40s and the 50s.
in the party system that we currently have. I think that someone like FDR.
Well, FDR's whole thing was we need a little bit of socialism now so we don't get full-blown socialism.
Well, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I just want to say
hold on.
that back to what David was talking about, and I'm not talking about political strategy here, okay? Because we can talk about that all night, about what the left needs to do. But I find it really interesting that the reason why, and I know why we had such high voter turnout this year, because the people on the left felt like if Donald Trump stays in office, we're going to lose our democracy. This is going to fall to fascism. And the people on the right thought the same thing, that if Biden wins, we're going to lose our democracy. We're going to fall to communism. And I just find it very interesting that we had this high, this large voter turnout because everybody is afraid that we're on the edge of losing our democracy. And if everyone in the country is feeling like we're on the edge of losing our democracy, that should tell us something right there.
That we're in a 4-2.
I actually wanted to say before we wrap up, Ryan, I know I got to be quick. We already have succumbed to not capitalism because this year when the stock started going down, the Federal Reserve outright bought stocks. The Federal Reserve and the nation state as a whole now views capitalism as an existential threat to itself due to competition with other countries. So, I don't think I don't think anybody was wrong.
I myself
We're gonna
define
lose.
capitalism as the ownership of the means of production by anyone that isn't the workers, including the state. But that's a separate point.
Yeah, I think state ownership is something different.
State ownership is still a form of whatever. We can get into that another time.
Let's wrap this episode up. Yeah. All right, guys.
Can I say one?
You got one.
You're
more
going to
thing.
have an interesting career in finance, Alice. That's all I can say.
All right, we'll wrap Catherine. I wanted David Kaiser to actually have the last word and remind us about Franklin Roosevelt. What did he say about fear? But go on, Catherine.
All I was gonna say was that I feel like I think from all of this, I think that there needs to be like a huge deprogramming because the fears have been stoked so heavily on both sides that's why we're in the state that we're in, because we're terrified of something. You could say that both sides are capitalizing on that fear, one more so than the other, and that's just tapping into our primal desire to cause harm in order to protect something that we're so afraid of. And so, I feel like just the deprogramming of.
I was just going to say
Kaiser.
that.
To happen.
Say the quote. Say the quote. Dave.
Well, FDR, yes, did believe in capitalism, but that it had to be regulated, that we had to do something about inequality, etc. I did bring a favorite quote, if you'll allow me. It'll take about a minute to read it. It's the end of democracy in America, and I used to read it at the end of many courses. And Tocqueville is talking about what does the spread of democracy mean? And he thinks it's going to spread all over the world, and there's nothing to be done about it. And he concludes as follows. I am increasingly confirmed in my belief that for democratic nations to be virtuous and prosperous, it is enough if they will to be so. I am aware that many of my contemporaries think that nations on earth are never their own masters, and that they are bound to obey some insupportable and unthinking power, the product of pre-existing facts of race or soil or climate. These are false and cowardly doctrines which can only produce feeble men and pusillanimous nations. Providence did not make mankind entirely free or completely enslaved. Providence has in truth drawn a predestined circle around each man beyond which he cannot pass, but within those vast limits, man is strong and free, and so are people. The nations of our day cannot prevent conditions of equality from spreading in their midst. but it depends upon themselves whether equality is to lead to servitude or freedom, knowledge or barbarism, prosperity or wretchedness. And
what David said at the beginning and what we've said throughout this about some people feeling that democracy was at stake in this election. I know that there were a lot of people who felt that that was hyperbole. And I have to say that seeing the way that Donald Trump and, to be honest, some of his supporters have reacted to this, I don't see any way that I'm like, it just seems pretty obvious to me that those fears were warranted. And I know that people will say, well, Republicans feel the same way. And I empathize, but on the other hand too, it's like the fears that they've talked about for, so many years, like a lot of those things just haven't happened though. Like Obama was going to take away all of our guns and that didn't happen. But like we are seeing now how people are talking about not counting votes. Like that is like, so when people are saying like we're fearful for our democracy, I think that it's not merely tribalistic, like delusional state. It's like there's some evidence that those fears are credible.
I don't know that it's all propaganda. I think
Yeah,
that people sense. I think that people sense that there's something very, very wrong in this country, and maybe we really are.
But I mean, like Trump supporters are sending videos that have been proven to be false. Like they are sending videos to people saying that ballots are being thrown out, but when they've they're things that are not ballots and couldn't be ballots because of the size of the document.
Oh no, I agree with that, Tommy.
Yeah.
And we have just spent the last 4 years of every single day the president of the United States tweeting out hate speech and propaganda. And so he's whipped them up into a frenzy. There's no doubt about that. But what I'm saying is that if, regardless on where you're sitting on the political spectrum, if you are afraid and think that our democracy is that close to being lost, then maybe that's telling us something about the state of our government right now and the state of the foundation of our country.
So to that I will say, David, if I understood the quote correctly, which I may not have, if I understood the quote correctly, what I took from that is it's up to us. It's up to us. We can do this. And to go back to, I want to go back to something that you said and then loop into something that Alice had said so passionately a little while ago. I think going back to the Van Jones things, as much as I was ragging on him for crying, you had Van Jones who had a very emotional moment talking about the state of which he, as a person in this country and as a father and as a husband, the way that he experienced everyday life was proven to be more difficult than it already had been up through whatever 40 plus years of his life he had already led. It gave me a gut punch in that moment when Rick Santorum was then provided the alternate view of that, then by saying, there are people on the other side that feel the same way that you do because they fear the rise of communism because of Joe Biden's presidency, things like that. In my heart, that is not the same thing. Being afraid to take your family someplace, in my heart, that is not the same thing. The reality of it, though, is it is clearly in this country the same thing. In that balance of the scales, I think we can get wrapped up in whether or not my pain is deeper than your pain, but the matter is there's still pain. And if we're not willing to sit down and we're not willing to talk about that pain and talk about how we can alleviate that pain, and then looping in Alice, what you were talking about is we have policies that can resolve those pains.
Yeah.
Let's get them out there. Let's do the policies. We have what we need in order to win. Why is that the main attraction? Why aren't we touting that more? And I think, again, tying it back to David, it's not our president. It's not our president-elect. It's not our elected officials. Clearly, they've not been getting it right. And us putting it in their hands has not been getting it right. This is about us and what we're going to do from that point. And I think, again, the vast majority of us here today kind of feel and sound like we've dodged a bullet, And I think now the important thing is, okay, now we've dodged that bullet. Regardless of what's on the horizon, we've got to be left with a charge of what we're going to do next. Because I don't know if we're going to be able to, how many more bullets we're going to be able to dodge if we don't get this resolved.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
All right, guys, I'm going to have to wrap this up. We're going to have another part 2 of the reaction, post-election reaction. We're going to take that tomorrow. So, but for this show, thank you guys for joining Generational Talk.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ryan.
Take care.
Take it easy, guys.
Be safe, everybody.